Hello everybody. Okay, so the goal of today's video is to talk about heuristics and blind spots. And so this PowerPoint is going to use some examples from Daniel Simons and Steven Pinker, and as well as others. If you're not familiar with the term heuristics, it's basically a method at which we can arrive at information. And you can basically substitute the word shortcuts because that's essentially what we're doing. So one thing that we need to acknowledge is that, one, we are all human and that we all make errors. At least I hope you're human. We all use logical shortcuts to make decisions, and in many ways these shortcuts are actually really good things. Our experience is not always representative of reality, and in fact that's almost never the case, and that we did not evolve to be perfectly logical and reasonable. So many have argued that we've evolved two sort of forms of logic or forms of reason. One called System 1 reasoning, which is sort of the quick way at arriving at an answer, and System 2 reasoning. System 2 reasoning takes much longer, and we actually have to work through the problem, and that's what we truly think of as critical thinking. And both are useful. Both have their place. We don't want to spend an enormous amount of energy for relatively simple tasks when sort of these quick heuristics will arrive at the correct answer anyways. So here I have a picture of my pet cat, Coffee. So just think of our ancestors, and they're trying to avoid a ferocious wild tiger, much like my kitten here. So those who applied System 1 reasoning and heard some rustling in the grass behind them, they probably took precaution and potentially even ran away if they should have seen a large cat or predator. Those who employed System 2 reasoning and said, well, it's probably just the wind, and when they saw the big lion out in the savannah, they probably thought, well, maybe the lion's not hungry, maybe I should get some more information. Those ancestors got eaten. So System 1 reasoning is very useful. Heuristics are good things, but they can also lead us to occasional blind spots, and so we'll see some examples of that. Let's test this out. Okay, so all you have to do is you count how many times the player is wearing white past the basketball. Let's give this a try.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half miss the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it, but did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
All right, so what do you think? So I was among the 50% who saw the gorilla, but I completely missed the fact that a player left and that the curtain had changed color, and neither of those things are trivial details. So it's pretty shocking, pretty surprising, I'll leave a link to the video so that you can share it with your friends if you liked it. Okay, so let's test this out some more. So here's an example. All right, so example 1, a bat and ball cost $1.10. So the bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Write down your answer. Okay, so the answer is 5 cents, not 10. And so many people probably did this quickly in their head and intuitively thought 10 cents. But the answer isn't intuitive, because although relying on quick shortcuts is generally useful, those who actually work through the math problem will see that in this case, it's not right. So the ball costs 5 cents. You add together the bat that costs $1.05, so $1 more than the ball. that equals $1.10. Here's an example with sound, and this example, again, is going to demonstrate that, like the gorilla video, that our perceptions don't accurately model reality, and in fact, they almost never do.
Listen to this.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Let's listen to this again.
State governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Okay.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Okay. Everyone heard the word legislatures, I take it? Now, how many of you think you actually heard an S? I mean, I think I hear an S. I know the illusion. I hear an S. Okay? Now, listen to what's actually there.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
Now let's go back and hear this.
The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city. The state governors met with their respective legislatures convening in the capital city.
It's pretty powerful, eh?
So that one's really trippy to me, because I can listen to that example over and over and over again, and every single time I could just swear that I am hearing an S, even though it's not there. So, but my perceptions are lying to me, and that's often the case. You know, we think we see something, and it's not what we actually thought we saw. So, you know, for those people claiming they saw Bigfoot, or or that they saw a UFO, or they saw Nessie, you should require some evidence for those sorts of claims. Okay. An important point here is that content really matters in how we see things and how we arrive at answers. And so for certain forms of content, like politics, we get very emotional, and different parts of our brain react to those questions. And depending on the content, so if it's numbers, another part of our brain might be at play, and that affects whether we use System 1 reasoning, or perhaps where we use System 2 reasoning, and whether or not the question is intuitive to us, or whether it is not. Okay, so here's an example. So example 2, you've been dating someone for 5 years. Let's say you begin to realize that the relationship isn't quite working out, and the efforts that you've made, they don't seem to be working either. You just find that your partner and you have become different people in the time that you've known each other, and you don't love them quite the way that they love you. What do? Do you break up? So a lot of people would actually dwell on this question, and they would spend a lot of time thinking about it, because the answer will have a significant impact on their future selves and their lives. But let's change the content, and let's see if it's any easier. Okay, so version 2 of example 2, pretty much exactly the same, just change the content just a little bit and tweak the dials here on our thought experiment. So you're walking to the store, which is 5 miles away. Halfway there, you realize, you know what, the store is closed and not even open today. So do you continue to walk the full way? And this is called the sunk cost fallacy, and it's pretty easy to see here. The 2.5 miles that you've walked already, they're gone. You've lost them. You're not going to get them back. Walking the full way won't make the store magically open. So the answer is that you shouldn't continue to walk the full way unless you just enjoy walking. And in the previous example of the relationship, you should probably break up with your partner if that's the case, if it's just not working out. That time is lost. You're not going to get that time back. This should apply for whether it's time to pass and move on to a new job, or maybe even if you find that in your major that you're studying for, you're not particularly happy and you want to switch majors. Do you want to spend an extra year in school, or do you want to sort of suffer through 30 years of being in the wrong field? Okay, so let's see another example where people often arrive at the incorrect answer, just because the process that we should use to arrive at the answer isn't necessarily easy and isn't necessarily intuitive. I might be priming you to not fall prey to them, but let's give it a try and see if it makes sense to you. Okay, we have a set of cards, okay? And every card has a number on one side, and on the other side they have a letter. A second rule: if a card has a D on one side, then it must have a 3 on the other side. So if D, then 3. Okay, so 2 roles. So one side has letters, one side has numbers, and if D, then 3. So turning over the smallest number of cards, which of the following cards must be turned over to test the rule if D, then 3? So we have D, F, 3, and 7. Okay, so take a moment to think about this and then write down your answers. Okay, so what are your answers? Many people will pick the cards D. Most people agree on that one. And then also many people will pick the cards 3. But if you did, you're wrong. The correct answer is to pick the card D and to pick 7. So, and we'll look at some reasons why we get this wrong. Okay, so why do people get this wrong? The key reason is what's called confirmation bias. So we tend to look to see examples of things that confirm things that we agree with, and we avoid examples of things that don't agree with what we want to agree with. So this is one of the reasons why most people agreed that we needed to turn over the D, but they didn't want to look at the 7 to try to disconfirm the rule. The other reason is that numbers just aren't intuitive to us. You know, our brains don't want to spend the extra energy that it takes, so we use heuristics and shortcuts to try to work around them. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is simply to just try to prove yourself wrong. Try to read and look at arguments that disagree with you and try to test concepts using other examples. So change the content, use thought experiments to change the content to see if your belief systems are consistent. And we've done this throughout the class where we've done a thought experiment and we've changed and we've twisted the dials a little bit. And then we find, there are some inconsistencies here. And so that will help you think a little bit more critically and arrive hopefully at better answers. Okay, so let's look at another version of the previous examples. Almost everything is the same as if D then 3, except we've changed the content. And this example I've borrowed, by the way, from Steven Pinker. So here, if a patron is at a bar and is drinking beer, the patron must be 21. So let's say you're a bouncer and you have to enforce this rule. So if drinking beer, the person must be 21, right? Otherwise, the bar will get shut down and you'll lose your job. So really important that you follow this rule. All right, so you have 4 people there. You have a guy drinking beer and you don't know how old they are. The second person is a guy drinking Coke. How old? And again, you don't know how old they are. The third person there is a guy you know is older than 21. And the fourth person is a guy you know is under 21. Okay, so who do you have to check? Okay, and so this one's really easy. Most people pick the right answer. So they pick the guy drinking beer, and they don't know how old they are because they know that they need to make sure that he's at least 21. And they pick the guy, they check to see what the guy who they know is under 21 is drinking. So this is a really good example, again, of how content really matters. Okay, so what are our conclusions we can draw from these examples? Just to acknowledge that depending on the content, we are prone at arriving at false conclusions. That's how we've evolved. And so, and everybody is capable of making these mistakes. It doesn't mean that we're not smart. We are all subject to these sorts of confirmation biases and heuristics and shortcuts. And in some cases, the smarter you are, the more prone you are to them. Okay, the other point is that we are capable of logical thinking, but, we do use these shortcuts and are often biased to accept the conclusions that we like and then to reject those that we dislike. So think back to the if D then 3. You want to prove the rule true. We often forget to try to also prove the rule false, okay? And what we can draw from this is that we can use alternative examples and thought experiments to constantly recheck our logic and try to find out if there are any inconsistencies. Okay, so that's it. I hope you liked the video and, go out there and try to disprove your own belief systems and be a skeptic.